Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. As-salatu was-salamu ala Muhammadin wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Rabbi zidni ilman. So, assalamu alaikum everyone. And today, the title of our talk is Be Gentle of Heart and Speech. So, our relationships are central to our well being, whether it is our family relationships, our friendships, our marriage, or our communities. The quality of our connections has a profound impact on our mental, emotional, spiritual, and even physical health. Research has consistently shown that strong, healthy relationships contribute to lower stress levels, increased happiness, and greater resilience in the face of life's challenges. And conversely, stress in our close relationships greatly negatively impacts our well being. So, Islam places immense emphasis on the importance of maintaining and nurturing our relationships. If we think about it this way, our vertical relationship with divinity, with God, both impacts and is impacted by the quality of our horizontal relationship with creation. When we are at peace in our relationships with each other, it is easier to focus spiritually. And when we are connected to Him, it is easier to be kind and forgiving and just. Can you see that? So, of course, in a sense, having a great relationship with God is easier, right? He doesn't speak back and He is all giving, all merciful. Human beings, of course, are a little bit more complicated. But the Quran is filled with wisdom on how to interact with kindness, to resolve conflicts, and strengthen the bonds that hold us together. So, over the next few days, we will now turn to the Quran for guidance on how to build and sustain fulfilling relationships. So, today, let us remind ourselves of the power of gentleness and mercy in our interactions. In verse 159 of chapter 3, which is Surah Aal-e-Imran, Allah tells the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, "So, by the mercy from Allah, O Muhammad, you were lenient with them, and if you had been rude in speech and harsh in heart, they would have disbanded from about you. So pardon them and ask forgiveness from them." This is just the first part of the verse, and this is what we will be talking about today. So, this part of the verse highlights a key principle in maintaining relationships, which is gentleness and kindness in speech and demeanor. Even the most well intentioned advice or leadership can fall flat if it is delivered with harshness. The Prophet ﷺ was tasked with uniting people of different temperaments, backgrounds, and levels of faith, even different social backgrounds. What made him so successful was not just his truthfulness, his sense of responsibility, but also the way he delivered his message, which was with mercy, leniency, and patience. So, this particular verse came down after the Battle of Uhud, and it refers to the Holy Prophet ﷺ's demeanor with his companions after the disaster on the battlefield of Uhud. What had happened was that some companions had flagrantly disobeyed him. They had left their post before they were commanded, and the Prophet did not reproach them harshly, although the disobedience had led to a major defeat for the Muslims. So, here the Quran is testifying to the gentle nature of the Prophet, which endeared him to all. And here it is reckoned as one of the mercies of Allah that he was like that. And we know that one of the Prophet ﷺ's title himself is a mercy to all creation, right? Rahmatul lil Alameen. And at no time was this gentleness, this mercy, this long suffering with human weakness more valuable than after a disaster like that at Uhud. Now, by all standards of military command and submission to leadership, the expectation was that these rogue companions would be dealt with severely for leaving their posts in the midst of battle. Which actually, what happened was it turned a near victory, they were almost victorious, into defeat for the Muslims. The Prophet ﷺ, however, did not reproach them harshly. He continued the wise course of action, continued to do the right thing, and continued to treat the people with kindness. We can learn so much from this part of the verse. In life, we often deal with people in our families, in our community, at work, and beyond, who challenge our ego by not following even great advice or guidance, who do things that cost them and sometimes us very dearly. They bruise our ego and lead us to become defensive and aggressive. it is so very tempting in that situation, especially if we have more power, resources, and influences than them, to act by reacting with the hurt to our ego. Justifying ourselves and telling them, I told you so, are just a couple of examples of unhelpful behavior in such a situation. The reason it's unhelpful is because it will never work. It doesn't help the situation, it doesn't help them learn. Why? Because it simply diverts their energies into defending themselves from our words. Also, it will alienate them from us, and we will be reacting based on their behavior and not our principles or values, which means that we will not be satisfied with our own behavior as well. So, this verse reminds us that positions of leadership within and outside our homes require that we have the emotional maturity and wisdom not to react or to retaliate to others' actions. So, what can we do instead? We can start by reminding ourselves of our intention and our goal. If our goal is to help people learn, then we have to use tactics that will help achieve that. We have to remind ourselves of our own principles and values, and we also have to remind ourselves that all humans, including ourselves, make mistakes. We need to ask ourselves what would help the situation, and then consider options for our actions based on all of these above considerations. And following this, as the verse reminds us, pardon them and ask forgiveness for them, right? Of course, none of this is easy, and it is the only path which allows us to exemplify self-leadership and qualifies us to lead others. So whether it's parenting, it's marriage, friendships, or community leadership, the way we speak and treat others determines whether they're drawn closer to us or if they're pushed away. I often remind myself, if the Holy Prophet ﷺ could not get away with being harsh, how can I expect that it's going to be different for me? So, what is the impact of harshness and criticism? If we understand this, then maybe we can move, we can be better. So, modern psychology affirms what the Quran teaches us, that harsh words and criticism do not inspire change. What they do is they trigger emotional flooding. So, what is emotional flooding? It's the body's stress response when we feel attacked, overwhelmed, or criticized. When someone is harsh with us, whether it's through words or tone or body language, our nervous system perceives it as a threat. We cannot distinguish at that moment whether we are being attacked by a tiger in the jungle or if it is in fact our spouse criticizing us. Our brain shifts into self-protection mode rather than connection mode. Instead of listening and responding thoughtfully, we have very few options. We can either defend ourselves, for example, by saying, that's not true, I didn't do anything wrong. Or we can shut down, withdraw, become silenced, or avoid the person. Or we can fight back, right? Attack with criticism of our own. In this state, our heart rate has increased, our stress hormones have surged, and the logical part of our brain has become less active. Sometimes it can even go offline. In other words, it's not working, right? So instead of fostering understanding at that point, the conversation is spiraling into conflict or disconnection. When we are harsh, we don't just harm relationships, we shape the emotional habits of those around us. People treated with harshness learn to respond with either fear or aggression or just disconnection. On the other hand, when we approach others with softness and wisdom, we encourage emotional openness and trust and growth. So this is why the Quran emphasizes leniency and mercy in communication. People are so much more likely to listen to us, to trust us, and to connect when they feel safe, respected, and valued. And when we continue to value people despite their mistakes and missteps, it also allows them an opportunity to self-reflect and to correct their behavior rather than spending all their energy on defending themselves from us. So how do we communicate in difficult moments? Let's reflect for a moment. When we are correcting or advising someone, do we pause to consider how our words might be perceived? Do we notice ourselves shutting down or getting defensive when criticized? How does this affect our ability to stay connected? So, how can we practice gentle firmness? That is, addressing issues without causing emotional flooding in ourselves or others. So, here are some things to consider. Firstly, choosing the right moment is very important. For those of us who believe that if something's bothering me, I have to have it out at that moment, is really not a good strategy for strong relationships. If emotions are high, people are triggered, it's always a good idea to take a break before having a difficult conversation. Use a gentle startup. So, Dr. Gottman's research has shown that how a conversation starts is generally how it ends. And if we start with criticism, you always, you never, it's not likely to end well. A gentle startup would be speaking about myself, for example, I feel or I noticed, right? And of course, practice pardon and forgiveness. When someone reacts defensively, pause and offer reassurance. This helps their nervous system get back to calm. So we can learn to kind of regulate each other in the midst of difficult conversations. Of course, we need to be mindful of our tone and our expression. Sometimes we know it's not what we say, but how we say it, including body language, that causes the damage. And we need to seek connection and not victory. Conversations are not about proving who's right. They are about understanding. If we shift our goal from trying to convince the other person to trying to understand the other person and getting ourselves understood, we would make so much more progress in conversations. So today, let's reflect on how our words and our tones impact those around us. Are we helping others feel safe and connected? Or are we unintentionally pushing them into self protection mode? And the Quran reminds us that true strength and leadership lies in softness, in gentleness, and in mercy. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.